On the planet Viridia, under skies that shimmered with green and gold light, there was a palace unlike any other. Its walls floated like clouds, and gardens of glowing flowers hovered in the air. The palace was home to King Solon, the ruler of Viridia, and his family. But among all the people in the grand palace, there was one who was mostly invisible to everyone else. Princess Lyra. Lyra had been born blind. Her eyes, pale and gentle, could not see the sparkling lights or the floating gardens that filled the palace halls. Yet her mind was sharp, and she could remember everything she touched, smelled, or heard. She knew the pattern of every hallway, the sound of every room, and the voice of every servant. But the court did not notice her abilities. Nobles whispered about her behind their fans and walked past her as if she were air. They thought she could not take part in serious matters because she could not see. Lyra often spent her days alone, sitting in a quiet corner of the palace library. The library was huge, with walls that stretched into the clouds and books that glowed faintly with ancient knowledge. She could feel the edges of the books and hear the whisper of turning pages. But the nobles never came to her here. They were too busy planning festivals, trading deals, and showing off their bright clothes. Even the king, though he loved her deeply, spent most of his time with the advisors and the palace council. Lyra often wondered if anyone would ever truly see her, not just her face but her mind and heart. One morning, a message arrived at the palace. A human diplomat was coming to Viridia. Humans were rare visitors, and they were known for their curiosity, courage, and kindness. The court buzzed with excitement. Nobles hurried to polish their robes and practice their speeches. Everyone hoped to impress the human visitor, except, of course, for Lyra. She did not expect anyone to notice her. The next day, the visitor arrived. His name was Aaron. Unlike the Viridians, he walked with calm confidence, smiled easily, and had a way of looking at people that made them feel important. When he entered the palace, the nobles crowded around him, eager to show their best manners and skills. Lyra watched from the library balcony as the crowd moved like a flowing river, but her eyes could not follow colors or faces. Still, she could sense the energy, the excitement, and the nervous whispers that filled the air. Aaron was different. He did not ignore the quiet corners. He did not only speak to the nobles or the council. Somehow, he felt Lyra's presence. He stepped away from the crowded hall and walked toward the library, his step soft and certain. Lyra felt a gentle touch on her shoulder and heard his voice. "Hello," he said. "Are you Lyra?" Lyra nodded. "Yes," she said softly. "I am Princess Lyra." "I am Aaron," he said. "I've heard a lot about Viridia, but I want to hear from you. Will you talk with me?" Lyra was surprised. No one had ever asked her that before. Not a noble, not a servant, not even the king in a formal council. She nodded again. "Yes, I would like that." For the rest of the day, they sat together in the library. Aaron asked questions about the palace, the gardens, the floating halls, and the stars above Viridia. Lyra described everything she could sense: the soft hum of the palace energy, the scent of flowers floating in the air, and the way the sunlight danced on the walls. Aaron listened carefully, asking more questions whenever she paused. He did not treat her as fragile or incapable. He treated her as a friend, a thinker, a person with ideas. "You know so much," Aaron said with admiration. "Even though you cannot see, you notice things that everyone else misses." Lyra smiled. It was the first time someone had said that to her. Most people only saw her blindness, not her ability. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen. Over the next few days, Aaron spent more time with Lyra. They explored the gardens together. Lyra guided him through paths where floating flowers hovered in the air, and he described colors and patterns for her. In return, she taught him to sense the patterns of the palace, how the wind moved through the halls, how the energy of the floating stones changed at different times of the day, and how the subtle sound of the water fountains could tell when a storm was coming. The court noticed. At first, they were skeptical. "Why does the human spend time with the blind princess?" some whispered. Surely he should learn from the council, not the girl who cannot see. But Aaron did not care about whispers. He respected Lyra, and he made sure everyone in the palace saw her value. Slowly, even some of the nobles began to pay attention, not because they understood her fully, but because Aaron did. One evening, as the twin moons of Viridia rose into the sky, Lyra and Aaron sat on a balcony overlooking the palace gardens. The air was filled with the soft hum of energy from the floating plants. Lyra listened to the sound of the wind and smiled. "Do you ever wish you could see?" Aaron asked gently. Lyra thought for a moment. "Sometimes," she said, "but I can feel so much. I can understand patterns and hear the world in ways others do not. Seeing might show me shapes, but it might not teach me what I already know." Aaron nodded, impressed. "You have a gift," he said. "Not everyone can notice the world like you do." Lyra laughed softly. "I always thought it was a curse." "Humans believe every challenge is also a chance," Aaron said. "Sometimes, what others see as a weakness is actually strength. You just need someone to notice it." Lyra felt a warmth in her chest. For years she had been invisible, forgotten, and overlooked. But now, with Aaron, she was noticed, not for appearances or abilities the court valued, but for her mind, her insight, and her courage. For the first time, she felt like she belonged. The palace began to change slowly. Where Lyra and Aaron walked, together whispers became questions, curiosity, and eventually respect. The nobles watched the human listen carefully to the princess, and some even began to ask her advice on small matters. It was a small beginning, but a beginning nonetheless. As part 1 closed, Lyra realized that life in the palace could be different. Perhaps with Aaron's guidance and her own insight she could find her place, not as the blind princess who was ignored, but as someone who could make a difference. For the first time she looked forward to tomorrow, not as a lonely day, but as a day full of possibilities. The morning sun rose over the floating palace of Viridia, painting the walls in soft gold and green light. Princess Lyra woke in her quiet chamber, listening to the gentle hum of the palace energy. Today was different. Today she would explore more than just her familiar corners. Today, she and Aaron, the human visitor, would learn from each other in ways she had never imagined. Aaron arrived promptly at her door, his footsteps light but confident. "Good morning, Princess," he said with a smile. "Are you ready to explore the palace today?" Lyra nodded. "Yes, Aaron. I want to show you the gardens first. They are my favorite place." The gardens of the palace were unlike anything a human had seen before. Flowers floated in the air, glowing softly in shades that humans could see, but Lyra felt with her hands and ears. Some flowers hummed faintly, others released scents that changed as the sun rose higher. Lyra guided Aaron carefully, describing every detail. "Feel this one?" she said, placing his hand near a flower. "It hums like a small bell, and if you listen closely it echoes the rhythm of the palace energy." Aaron leaned close, closing his eyes to focus. "I hear it." He said, "It's like music. Humans often miss sounds like this because we rely on sight too much." Lyra smiled. "You notice quickly. That is why you can see the world in a way I cannot. I use my senses differently, but you notice things I cannot feel." They walked slowly, through the floating gardens. Lyra explained how the flowers followed the palace energy, how the fountains shifted in invisible patterns, and how the wind created tiny whirlpools that lifted petals gently into the air. Aaron listened carefully, asking questions and sometimes touching the flowers to feel the vibrations Lyra described. "You know," Aaron said, "humans are very curious. We like to explore, to understand, and to experiment. But your sense of the palace, your way of feeling it, teaches me something new. Humans often ignore the small details, but here, every detail matters." Lyra laughed softly. "Then we can learn from each other." After the gardens, Lyra led Aaron to the palace library. the place she loved most. The library was enormous, filled with glowing books that floated gently in the air. Lyra moved among them like a dancer, feeling the shapes and textures of the covers, memorizing the sound of every page turning. "Here," she said, taking a thick book in her hands. "This one tells the story of Viridia's stars. Even though I cannot see them, I can feel their patterns in the text and maps. Humans might find it strange, but I hear the stars' story in this book." Aaron sat beside her and carefully touched the pages, listening as Lyra described the constellations and their histories. "I never knew stars could have personalities," he said. "Humans think of stars as cold and distant, but you make them alive." Lyra smiled. "Everything has a story if you listen closely. Even people." As the day passed, they shared knowledge back and forth. Lyra explained alien science, how the palace energy flowed, how the floating stones held balance, and how small changes could affect the palace in ways humans might not notice. Aaron taught Lyra about human logic, inventions, and problem-solving techniques. He showed her diagrams of machines and told stories of humans exploring planets far beyond Viridia. "You see," Aaron said, "humans have always relied on imagination and trying new ideas. Sometimes we fail, but every failure teaches us something. That is how we grow." Lyra thought for a moment. "Then failure is not bad. It is a lesson?" "Yes," Aaron said. "It is a step forward, and every step forward, no matter how small, is important." The palace court, however, was not pleased. Nobles whispered behind closed doors, complaining about the human spending time with a blind princess. "Why does he waste time with her?" one whispered. "Surely he should learn from the council or the king. She cannot see the palace or the stars. What can she teach?" But Aaron did not care. He continued spending time with Lyra, valuing her thoughts and insight. Slowly, the whispers began to change. Not entirely yet, but the first seeds of curiosity had been planted. Some younger nobles peeked into the library, listening quietly, trying to understand what drew the human to the princess. One afternoon, Aaron had an idea. "Lyra, let's see if we can combine human ideas with your knowledge of Viridia. Maybe we can understand something new." Lyra's interest sparked immediately. "What do you mean?" "Well," Aaron said, "humans often look for patterns. We think in steps, diagrams, and experiments. You already notice patterns in ways I cannot. What if we try to solve a small problem together? Something real in the palace?" Lyra's fingers traced the edge of a floating book. "Yes, I think I can help." They began by studying the palace fountains. The fountains floated above the ground, their water shaped into glowing streams by the palace energy. Lyra noticed small changes in the movement, subtle shifts that hinted at energy flow patterns. Aaron suggested using a small human-designed device to map the patterns mathematically. As they worked together, Lyra described what she felt. The pull of the fountains, the way the water curved in the air, and the small vibrations in the floating stones. Aaron wrote down the measurements, compared them with human patterns, and slowly, they saw a pattern emerge that neither of them could have noticed alone. "This is incredible," Aaron said. "Your sense of the palace is like a map I cannot see, and my device measures what you feel. Together, we understand the fountains in a way no one else has." Lyra smiled. "Then we can teach the others. Maybe the court will finally see that I am not useless." By evening, they sat together on a balcony overlooking the palace. The twin moons rose into the sky, and the floating gardens glowed softly in the night. Lyra rested her hand on the railing, feeling the breeze. "You know, Aaron," she said, "I never thought someone could truly listen to me. The court ignores me because of my blindness, but you notice everything I say, everything I feel." Aaron looked at her with a gentle smile. "Humans believe that every person has something valuable. It is not about seeing with your eyes. It is about seeing with your heart and mind. You have always had that, Lyra. I just wanted to help the court see it too." Lyra felt a warmth spread in her chest. For the first time, she realized that maybe being blind was not a weakness. It gave her a unique way to understand the world, a way humans and aliens could both learn from. As the night deepened, Lyra reflected on the day. She had learned about human thinking, creativity, and courage. She had taught Aaron about her world, her palace, and the subtle patterns only she could sense. Together, they had uncovered something new, something that might change the way the court saw her. And for the first time, Lyra felt hope. Hope that tomorrow, perhaps, the court would stop ignoring her. Hope that one day she could show the nobles and her father, the king, that even a blind princess could be wise, clever, and capable of helping her people in ways no one had imagined. The stars above Viridia twinkled like distant flames, and Lyra imagined each one telling a story. Some stories were human, some alien, and some uniquely hers. With Aaron by her side, she felt ready to learn, explore, and show the world her place among the stars. The next morning, the palace of Viridia was unusually quiet. A gentle wind swirled through the floating gardens, and the streams of glowing water from the fountains glimmered softly. Princess Lyra awoke to the familiar hum of the palace energy, but something felt different. There was a tension in the air, subtle but noticeable. The servants whispered among themselves, and the palace council seemed uneasy. Lyra's heart beat faster. She could feel that something was coming, though she did not know what. When Aaron arrived at her chamber, he too sensed the change. His brow was slightly furrowed, but his voice remained calm. "Good morning, Lyra," he said. "The palace is unsettled today. Do you feel it too?" Lyra nodded. "Yes. The fountains, the stones, even the air feels different. Something is not right." They moved through the palace together, Lyra guiding Aaron along familiar paths, her fingers brushing the floating railings and walls. As they reached the main hall, they found the council gathered in hurried discussion. The advisors were speaking in low tones, their voices tense. King Solon noticed them and waved them forward. "Lyra, Aaron," he said, his voice calm but concerned. "We have a situation. A storm unlike any we have ever seen is forming above Viridia. The palace energy alone may not be enough to protect us. We need a solution, and fast." Lyra's heart pounded. A storm? The floating gardens? The fountains? The very halls themselves could be damaged if the storm hit. The court looked at her briefly, but most quickly turned away. No one thought a blind princess could help in this kind of crisis. Aaron, however, looked directly at her. "Lyra," he said softly, "we've worked together before. You notice things I cannot, and I can help in ways you might not expect. Let's see what we can do." Lyra took a deep breath. Her hands traced the edges of the nearby fountain, feeling its flow and energy. "The storm. It is not normal," she said. "The palace energy is shifting in ways I have never felt before. If we can redirect it, we might protect the palace." Aaron nodded. "Tell me exactly what you feel, and I will help figure out how to apply human logic to it." For hours they worked together. Lyra described the changes in energy, the way the stones beneath the palace floors vibrated, the rhythm of the fountains and the shifting patterns in the floating gardens. Aaron used his human knowledge of patterns, diagrams, and cause and effect to map the energy flow mathematically. "Look here," Aaron said, pointing to a pattern in his notes. "If we adjust the energy flow in this sequence, it should create a protective shield around the palace. But we must be careful. Too much energy could make the fountains overflow or even destabilize the floating stones." Lyra nodded, feeling the palace energy in her fingers. "We can do it," she said. "I can guide the energy. You can help measure it. Together we can balance it." The palace council watched, stunned. A blind princess guiding the palace's energy? They could not understand how it was possible, but they did not interfere. Perhaps in their confusion, they realized that this human visitor truly believed in her. Working side by side, Lyra and Aaron moved through the palace. Lyra touched the stones, feeling their vibrations and shifting energy as she directed it. Aaron recorded every change, comparing it with human patterns, making small adjustments. The storm above Viridia grew larger, dark clouds swirling with green and gold light. But inside the palace, a calm rhythm emerged. Hours passed. Lyra felt fatigue, but she did not stop. She focused on every vibration, every hum, every pulse of energy. Aaron kept her steady, reminding her to breathe and guiding her hands when needed. Together they found the balance. The palace energy shifted, forming an invisible shield that absorbed the storm's fury. Outside, the storm raged. Lightning of green and gold flashed across the sky, and wind whipped around the floating gardens. But the palace remained safe. Fountains flowed normally, floating stones stayed in place, and the gardens glowed softly, untouched. When the storm finally passed, the palace council erupted in astonishment. Nobles who had ignored Lyra all her life now stared at her with disbelief. The blind princess had saved the palace, not with swords, not with power, but with knowledge, observation, and courage. King Solon stepped forward, pride in his voice. Lyra, you have done something remarkable. I always knew you were special, but today you have shown all of Viridia your strength. Lyra felt a warmth spread through her chest. She had done it. Not alone. Aaron had stood beside her. But she had done it. She had proven that her blindness was not a weakness. It was a different way of seeing the world, one that could solve problems others could not. Aaron smiled at her. You guided the energy perfectly, he said. Humans have patterns, and aliens have energy. But you combined them in a way neither of us could do alone. Some of the nobles whispered among themselves, clearly reconsidering their views. One young noble approached Lyra hesitantly. Princess, I didn't think you could do this, he said. But you were right. Your senses, they helped all of us. Lyra smiled gently. It is not just me. Aaron helped and we worked together. But thank you for seeing my abilities now. The palace buzzed with a new energy. People who had ignored Lyra before now looked at her differently. Perhaps they still did not fully understand, but they could no longer dismiss her. That evening, Lyra and Aaron sat together on the palace balcony, looking out at the stars. The storm had passed, leaving the sky clear and sparkling. Lyra listened to the distant hum of the palace energy and felt the gentle breeze on her face. Today was incredible, she said softly. I never thought I could help in a crisis like this, and I never thought the court would take notice. Aaron nodded. Humans believe that every person has a unique strength. You've shown yours today. It is not about sight or strength. It is about understanding, courage, and determination. You had all of that inside you all along. Lyra felt tears prick her eyes, though she did not see them. I always felt invisible, she said. Ignored, overlooked, forgotten. But today I feel seen. Not just by you, but by everyone. Aaron reached out and took her hand gently. You've earned it, Lyra. You've always had it. I just helped the world notice. Lyra smiled, squeezing his hand. She realized that this was only the beginning. There would be more challenges, more problems to solve, and more opportunities to show what she could do. But now she had confidence. Now she knew that even a blind princess could stand strong and make a difference. As the night deepened, Lyra reflected on what she had learned. Humans were not just clever. They were brave, curious, and willing to stand beside those others ignored. That was the true strength she had witnessed in Aaron, and now she wanted to carry that strength herself. For the first time, Lyra felt the full power of possibility. Tomorrow, the court might still have doubts. Tomorrow, there might be new challenges. But she was ready. With knowledge, courage, and a friend who believed in her, she could face anything. And for the first time, she realized that being blind was not a limitation. It was a gift. It allowed her to sense the world in ways others could not. With Aaron's guidance and the palace's new respect, Lyra could turn her unique abilities into something extraordinary. Above Viridia, the stars twinkled as if congratulating her, Each light seemed to whisper, "This is only the beginning." The morning after the storm, the palace of Viridia shimmered in a soft light. The fountains flowed steadily, the floating gardens glowed, and the air carried a gentle hum of energy. The palace was alive with whispers. Nobles who had ignored Princess Lyra for years now walked with hesitation, glancing at her with a mix of curiosity and newfound respect. Something had changed, and everyone sensed it. Lyra woke early, feeling a calm determination. The night had been peaceful, and the stars outside, her window had seemed to shine just for her. Aaron was already waiting outside her chamber, carrying a small human device that measured patterns in the palace energy. "Good morning, Princess," he said with a warm smile. "Ready for today?" Lyra nodded. "Yes, I want to show the court that yesterday was not just luck. We can solve problems and make things better." Together they moved through the palace halls. Lyra's hands traced familiar paths, and Aaron described the world she could not see. As they walked, nobles stepped aside, whispering in surprise. Some even paused to watch them pass, clearly unsure how to act. In the council chamber, the atmosphere was tense but hopeful. King Solon addressed the court. "Yesterday, Princess Lyra and our human visitor Aaron worked together to protect the palace. They used intelligence, observation, and courage. I believe this is a moment for all of us to learn." The nobles murmured. Many were still skeptical, but their whispers were quieter than usual. Lyra stood quietly beside Aaron, her hands folded calmly. She could feel the attention of the room, the curiosity, and the cautious respect. Aaron spoke next. "Humans believe that every person has value. Strength is not always visible. Knowledge, empathy, and courage are strengths too. Princess Lyra has shown all of these. I hope the court can see this as well." Some of the younger nobles nodded, slowly beginning to understand. Others still whispered quietly, unsure how to respond. But a seed of change had been planted. Lyra felt a surge of confidence. For years she had been ignored, unseen, and undervalued. Now, she had a voice. She spoke softly but clearly. "I know I am blind," she said, "but I can feel the palace, understand its energy, and notice patterns others miss. With help, we can solve problems, improve our gardens, our fountains, and even the way our city lives. I want to help Viridia in every way I can." The council fell silent. A few of the older nobles frowned, unaccustomed to seeing a princess speak so confidently. But the king smiled proudly. "Your words are wise, Lyra. You have shown courage and intelligence. I support your ideas, and I hope the court will follow your example." From that day, Lyra began to participate more actively in palace affairs. Aaron stood beside her, offering guidance when needed, but always letting her lead. Together they started small projects to improve life in the palace. Their first project was the floating gardens. The gardens were beautiful, but some plants did not receive enough energy, causing them to wilt or dim. Lyra could feel the imbalance, and Aaron helped her measure and adjust the energy using human-designed tools. "See here," Lyra said, touching a floating vine. "This one is too weak. Its energy is not balanced with the others." Aaron nodded. "We can redirect the flow slightly. If we adjust these stones, the energy will distribute evenly." Within hours, the gardens began to glow brighter, and the flowers lifted higher. Nobles walking past paused, impressed by the improvement. "Did Lyra do this?" one whispered. "It looks amazing." Encouraged by their success, Lyra and Aaron moved on to other projects. They helped the fountains maintain steady flow, guided by Lyra's sense of energy patterns. They repaired sections of the floating walls that had begun to drift slightly, using a combination of Lyra's intuition and Aaron's human measurements. Each project strengthened Lyra's confidence and demonstrated her value to the court. The palace court began to change. Nobles who had once ignored her now approached her with questions. "Princess, can you help us understand the energy of the new fountain?" asked one. Another added, Lyra, what do you think about improving the palace lighting? Lyra smiled. She answered carefully, teaching them to notice patterns and subtle changes. Aaron often stepped back, letting her take the lead. Slowly, the court began to listen. Slowly, they began to respect her. One afternoon, Lyra and Aaron were in the observatory overlooking the city. Lyra's fingers traced the patterns of the floating stones, feeling their vibrations. Aaron held a small device, mapping the energy, in graphs and charts. Do you see how humans and aliens can work together? Aaron asked. Your understanding of energy and my devices combined to make something neither of us could do alone. Lyra nodded. Yes. And the court is beginning to see that too. Maybe they will finally understand that being blind does not mean being powerless. A young noble approached them cautiously. Princess Lyra, he said, I want to learn from you. How do you notice the energy in the palace? Can you teach me? Lyra smiled gently. Of course. Anyone who wants to learn can. You must listen carefully, feel the patterns, and trust your senses. Aaron watched proudly. Humans often valued teamwork, encouragement, and standing beside someone others ignored. He saw Lyra learning these traits herself: courage, patience, and leadership. The week passed quickly. Each day brought new projects, new challenges, and more opportunities for Lyra to teach and guide. Nobles who had once whispered behind her back now asked her advice openly. Servants smiled when they saw her, noticing the change in the air. Even the older advisors, though slow to adjust, began to nod at her suggestions. One evening, as the twin moons rose above Viridia, the king invited Lyra to sit with him in the main hall. Lyra, he said, I have watched you this week. You have grown in confidence and wisdom. You have shown that even challenges that seem impossible can be overcome with patience, intelligence, and courage. Lyra blushed slightly. Thank you, Father. I could not have done it without Aaron's help. He taught me that humans see the world differently, and I can use that knowledge to help Viridia. The king smiled. Yes, humans are remarkable. But even more remarkable is you, my daughter. You have taken what you learned and used it to teach others. You are becoming a leader in your own right. Lyra felt a warmth spread in her chest. She had always dreamed of being noticed, of being valued for who she truly was. Now, that dream was coming true. Not because she had changed, but because she had the courage to stand beside someone who believed in her, and the wisdom to share her gifts. Aaron, standing nearby, gave her an encouraging nod. Humans believe that when you empower others, everyone grows stronger. You've done that today, Lyra. You've empowered the court, and they are starting to see it. The palace halls, once filled with whispers of doubt and disregard, now echoed with curiosity and respect. Lyra had not only proven her abilities, but she had begun to inspire change in others. As the night deepened, Lyra reflected on her journey. She thought of the storm, of the floating gardens, and of all the small improvements she had guided. She realized that being blind was not a limitation. It was a different way of seeing, a way to notice what others overlooked. With Aaron's guidance and with courage and patience, she had begun to teach others to see it too. Above Viridia, the stars shone like 1,000 tiny candles. Each star seemed to whisper encouragement. You are capable. You are seen. You are important. Lyra smiled and reached out to touch Aaron's hand. Thank you, she said softly. For believing in me, for standing beside me, and for helping me see that I have a place here. Aaron squeezed her hand gently. The credit is yours, Lyra. You did all the work. I only helped you see it for yourself. Lyra laughed softly, a sound that seemed to echo through the floating halls. She felt stronger, braver, and more certain of her place in the palace and in the world. The court was awakening to her abilities, and she was awakening to her own power. The palace of Viridia glowed softly under the morning light. Floating gardens sparkled, fountains sang their gentle hum, and the air was filled with a sense of calm and purpose. For the first time in her life, Princess Lyra felt fully a part of the palace. Not as someone overlooked, but as someone whose presence mattered. She stood on the balcony, feeling the wind brush against her face. The twin moons were already fading in the morning sky, and the stars that had guided her through countless nights seemed to shine brighter than ever. Aaron was beside her, holding a small device that recorded energy patterns in the palace. Together, they had learned how to balance the palace energy, how to improve the gardens and fountains, and how to solve challenges that no one else had dared to approach. "Good morning, Lyra," Aaron said warmly. "Are you ready for today? It might be our most important yet." Lyra smiled. "Yes. Today we will meet with the council to discuss the future. I want to show them how humans and aliens can work together, and how everyone has something valuable to contribute." The council chamber was buzzing with anticipation. Nobles who had once ignored her now looked at her with respect and curiosity. Some whispered among themselves, still adjusting to the idea that a blind princess could guide projects and teach valuable lessons. But most were silent, waiting to see what she would do. King Solon rose to address the assembly. "Lyra, the council has witnessed your work, your courage, and your wisdom. Today I invite you to speak about your ideas for the future of Viridia and our cooperation with humans." Lyra took a deep breath, feeling the familiar hum of the palace beneath her fingertips. She stood tall, confident in her knowledge, experience, and the lessons she had learned. "Thank you, Father," she began. "I have learned many things from our human visitor Aaron, and I have discovered things about our palace and ourselves that I want to share. Humans think differently from us. They value curiosity, experimentation, and courage. But the most important lesson is that everyone has something valuable to offer, even if they are overlooked or different." She paused, sensing the attention of the council. "For too long I have been ignored because of my blindness. But I have discovered that being different is not a weakness. It is a strength. It allows us to see the world in new ways, to notice patterns others miss, and to solve problems in ways no one else can." Aaron stood quietly beside her, offering support but letting her lead. The council listened intently, some nodding slowly, others exchanging surprised glances. Lyra continued, describing the projects she and Aaron had completed, the improved gardens, balanced fountains, and stable floating stones. She explained how human logic, combined with her understanding of palace energy, had made these successes possible. "Imagine what we can do if we continue to work together," Lyra said, "humans and Viridians side by side. Each of us has something to teach and each of us can learn. We can create a palace, a city, and a world where everyone's talents are valued, no matter who they are or what challenges they face." A hush fell over the council. For the first time, many of the nobles realized that Lyra's blindness had never been a limitation. Her ability to sense, understand, and lead was extraordinary. The young noble who had approached her weeks before stepped forward. "Princess Lyra," he said, bowing slightly, I want to work with you. Teach me how to notice what I cannot see and how to combine my skills with yours and Aaron's." Lyra smiled warmly. "Of course. Everyone who wants to learn and contribute is welcome. Together, we can make Viridia stronger and wiser." King Solon beamed with pride. "Lyra, you have shown not only courage but also leadership. You have taught us all a valuable lesson about seeing beyond appearances and valuing every individual. I am proud to call you my daughter, and I am proud of the leader you are becoming." As the council meeting concluded, Lyra realized that her world had changed completely. The nobles were no longer dismissive, the servants looked at her with admiration, and even the older advisors seemed ready to follow her guidance. She had become a bridge between humans and Viridians, showing that cooperation, respect, and empathy could overcome fear and prejudice. That afternoon, Lyra and Aaron walked through the floating gardens. The flowers swayed gently, glowing brightly, as if celebrating the change in the palace. Aaron handed her a small human device that recorded patterns in energy. "Do you remember how we started?" he asked. "We were just learning from each other. Now look at how far we've come." Lyra laughed softly. "Yes, And it all began because you chose to stand beside me when no one else did. Arin smiled. Humans believe that helping others brings out the best in everyone. You had the strength all along. I only helped you see it for yourself. Lyra squeezed his hand, feeling the warmth of friendship and trust. Then we will continue. Together we can teach the palace, guide our city, and even work with other planets. I want to show the universe that everyone has value no matter how different they are. The palace buzzed with activity in the following days. Lyra began co-leading a new council, composed of humans and Viridians working side by side. They planned projects to improve the city, manage resources, and explore new technologies. Lyra guided the council with patience, insight, and empathy, while Aaron offered human strategies, problem-solving methods, and encouragement. The court had been transformed. Nobles who once whispered about her blindness now sought her advice. Servants and younger nobles eagerly joined projects, excited to contribute and learn. And Lyra, who had once been ignored, now had a voice that shaped the future of Viridia. One evening, as the twin moons rose and the stars sparkled above the palace, Lyra stood on the balcony with Aaron. She felt the gentle wind on her face and the soft hum of the palace beneath her hands. "Do you think this will last?" she asked. Aaron smiled. "Humans believe that change takes time, but what you've started is strong. You've inspired respect, curiosity, and cooperation. You've shown everyone that being different is a strength. That lesson will last much longer than we can imagine." Lyra nodded. "Then the palace, and maybe even the world, will be a better place. Not because of me alone, but because we stood together, humans and Viridians alike." The stars above seemed to twinkle brighter, as if celebrating their partnership. Lyra felt a sense of peace, purpose, and hope she had never known before. She had transformed from the forgotten, blind princess into a leader, a teacher, and a symbol of courage, empathy, and cooperation. And in that moment, Lyra understood the true meaning of strength. It was not in power, sight, or status. It was in standing beside others, encouraging them, and using every gift, seen or unseen, to make the world better. The future of Viridia was bright, glowing like the twin moons above, filled with humans and aliens working together, learning from each other and valuing every voice. Lyra smiled, knowing that she had found her place, not just in the palace but in the hearts of those around her, and in the story of a world that had finally learned to see beyond appearances. Together, Princess Lyra and Aaron looked out over the city, knowing that the adventure was only beginning. The palace, the gardens, the stars above, all were waiting for them to explore, learn, and inspire. And with courage, empathy, and cooperation, there was nothing they could not achieve. Lyra, the blind princess who had once been ignored, was now seen. Not just by one human, but by an entire palace, and perhaps someday, by the universe itself.